This is not a guide to the use of actual Nicopress. Use of a Nicopress is potentially dangerous and should only be done by qualified personnel operating in conformity with all applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations.
All right, well, here we are on that 9/16 dredge trawl wire, and there's your dredge. It comes aboard. If it all looks like this, everything's fine, but that's not why we're here today. If your trawl wire comes aboard and it looks like this, that's your big kink, and that kink is definitely worth re-terminating the wire. So that's why we also have a video on how to terminate the wire. This is a feed fitting. It looks a little different than the other feed fitting. If you're in a big hurry and you want to just get something back in the water right quick and you don't want to spend a couple hours figuring out the feed fitting, or if you're on a boat that has no feed fittings, then there's another style you can do, a Nicopress, which is really fast, which is what we're going to show you next here. All right, so here we go. So the cool thing about the Nicopress tool is it can come to the job. Pull the guy out of the box, little threaded end, screws in here. Little pressure release, make sure that's tight. This guy slides back and forth. And then the big thing is choosing the right die. Sometimes they're labeled 9/16. There's also a letter label on it, M1. And then they're different sizes. So you can see that size there versus that size there. This is pretty obvious that there's a different size, but some sizes are real similar. So you want to make sure you have the right swage for the right wire. But that allows you this tool to do different size cable. So here's our M1, and there's a groove on one side and no groove on the other side. Slide that guy down all the way down. The quick and dirty of how this works is then the cable goes in, the next one goes in, slide that across, and you jack it all up. So that's kind of how the tool works. And then we're going to go through how you set up the wire for it. These are called your ovals. These are aluminum ovals. You can also get them in copper and or stainless steel. And you need a thimble, and you want a thimble with a sort of a solid web in it or a partially solid web in the middle. And the nice thing about doing this tool is you can just run out and bring the tool to the job rather than the job over to the workshop. So you slide this little guy on top, and sometimes the tape helps, and then sometimes the tape will get in the way. And I like to use two. All of this is extensive online information, mil-spec rated, military approved. You want all the tables exist. So if you're using this tool, usually somewhere there's a chart that has it. You get these started, and then you have to kind of do that. So before I tighten up the wire, I'll just get them fed through here. And oftentimes this is a two-person job. The more that you have, the easier it is to work with it. You come out here, it's pretty fast to get it started, and you can pull whatever tail you need to make the joint happen where you need it, and then you can just cut this off a second time. So that was pretty quick. The part that takes time is getting down into here, and if you have a vise you can do that, but you don't need to. You can kind of have it be a two-person job. And there's a few other tricks you can use. These tools, this is not what you do with a new crescent wrench, but you can see this one is perfect for the job. And then at this point, the second person comes in and hammers right here. Yeah. Okay, stop for a sec. And if you have a third person, somebody else can squeeze it together like that, and then hammer it some more. And you can see how we're working that down closer and closer and closer. There's the hammer. Often there's lots of people standing around on deck, so you can ask them to hold the end of the cable or pull tight on it. And this is kind of where it becomes a two-person job, and then someone else hammers right there. Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
Take the hammer,
All right.
hammer right there, yeah. Okay, and then I'll put this guy in. Let's do that all over again. Could you stand on that over there? And then we'll keep hammering.
Do you want that?
Yeah. And then we'll do some final hammering. A little bit more. Now you got the swage down there, and now you can put the guy in the, oh, this is a little bit loose, so we're still not quite there. Let's do a little bit more. All right. And a little bit more hammering. That's good. Now that's tight. It's fitting, it's holding. So now we're good to make our first crimp. These guys fit in here in a certain way. You can see in this one there's enough room to make 2 crimps. You don't want to have it in where it'll mushroom the end over. And you'll see when we're done, the end kind of opens up and makes it a little bit of a sort of a chafe-free entry into the swage. So set it up just about like that. And that's what you do when you're sizing it in here. The notch, put that guy in there, get the side with the notch. It's kind of a tight fit, the notch goes down. When you like where it is, that goes all the way across so you see it coming out on the other side. Make sure the thumb screw, this is the bleed off valve, so make sure that's tight. And then you just pump it up like this. A thing to be cognizant about is you're making a bunch of hydraulic pressure in here, so you don't want to have your face right here when you're doing it. And just the way the ergonomics of the tool work out, you can see it kind of moving. Once it starts to get tight, now I'm a little bit too far out, so I'm going to release the tension a tiny bit. Line it up, that way I can get 2 crimps on here. Tighten that back up, and then I'll just go over here and pump it up. And the way you know how many pumps to give it is it'll just stop. What ends up happening is you're squeezing these 2 guys together. You can't squeeze them anymore together when they touch, so. And there we are on the first one. Release the pressure. The little piston goes down, pull that. There's 1 crimp. Now we have room to do 1 more on there. So you kind of line it up. And what you saw there was the, whoops. Yeah, there. Now we have enough sticking out on this side that we're not going to pinch fold the ends over. As soon as it starts coming under tension, then you can remove your hand from the area. That is tight. And you can look in here and you can see they're together. Release that, release that, release that, and there is your crimp. And the nice thing to look at, you can see what's going on is if you line that up on wet end, it kind of squeezes it, makes it wider, and you see how it sort of opens up on both sides. That's why when you're setting the die up, you don't want the shoulder of the die on the edge of it. You want it out like that. That's real important rather than that. Sometimes this is kind of new technology, or nobody's ever been exposed to it. So it's nice to put a second one on, and we're going to do that here, but you don't want to put it on way back here because you'll lose that much of pick height on your A-frame. So you put it on up here, close. But also it's sometimes nice to have just a tiny little eye here, because that's a second way you can pull back. If some weird thing happened down here, there's a second way later if you're undoing some really nasty wuzzle on deck and this is buried in it. Here's another way to get a line through it to pull against a wuzzle. So we'll just do the second one real quick. And this is where it's really good to get somebody new on deck and have them do it, and they can see that it's not really that hard. It's really easy to do the first couple ones. And then they're, at that point, now a certified Nicopresser. This tool number 635 corresponds with the Nicopress information on the Nicopress website. These ovals, this is an M1 sleeve, aluminum, copper, and stainless, and all that information is in the link below. Yep. And there we are. That was that fast. There's just a few things to go over. Usually it's not a problem because you saw it with the hammer and the thing, but you don't want the oval to be pushed up and touching that when you first set out, because as you saw, it makes it longer. If it were touching that, you would be putting strain on there that didn't need to be there. And then this little guy, now if you had the overhead height, you could just seize it back here so it's not a pokey thing, or you could cut it off right there. And I'm a big fan of paint pen. Like I'll put a piece of paint marker there and there and there and there, and then that's just information. You can see if it's slipping. There might not be as much fatigue resistance right around here as you would want if you were going to set this up for like a 20-year application. On a dredging cruise, you're always going to cut the termination off after the cruise, so that's not really of a concern. And you have aluminum and steel, so there's a little bit of electrolysis issue. If it were underwater for years and years, like on a mooring, you wouldn't rig a mooring like this. But for a dredging cruise, you're going to cut it off anyway. So feed fitting is probably 100% of the wire strength. This fitting, for all practical purposes, is the same, but maybe the math would be like 99% of the wire strength. And then there's a poured fitting that you could do with a poured epoxy, like a spelter socket, or there's a Serobend type fitting that you could do. This one, because of its speed, and if it's giving us 99% of the wire strength, we're well above the yield strength of the wire anyway. We're never going to pull to that. We're always going to cut it off at the end of a dredging cruise. It's really fast. You can come out on deck. You don't have to take the wire through a bunch of sea doors to the workshop, so you don't have any fire issues with shutting a door or flooded space. The tool just comes right to you. By the time you send everyone off the deck to go get a cup of coffee in the galley, when they come back out, you're halfway done. So it's kind of a nice, fast way to go. What's also nice is these are pretty cheap. If you had a cruise where you lost all the chain or you needed to rig up something new, you could just peel off some of this 9/16 and you could make 4 links quite, real fast, pop an eye on it, and you could rig a whole new dredge without having to have been prepared for it in advance.